In the heart of the African savanna, under the golden sunlight shimmering over an endless horizon, warm winds swept across the dry land, and the sounds of wildlife rose everywhere. Here, in the famous Sabi Sands Reserve, a young cub named Rasta roamed the lands with his small pride. His emerging mane carried early signs of his rebellious personality, the one that would later define him as a colossal legend among the mighty Mapogo lions. Life in the savannah was simple, but certainly harsh. Each day was a test of survival as the pride fought to endure, feeding on what they hunted and defending their fragile territory from intruders. But despite his young age, Rasta had a wild spirit and great ambition, always pushing beyond the limits of his range, gazing with curious eyes toward the horizon, as if searching for something greater than mere survival. As the dry season came, challenges grew. Prey became scarce, and rival lions began drawing closer and closer to their territory. One evening, while the pride rested near a muddy waterhole, the roar of invading lions shattered the stillness of the plains. His mother, the seasoned lioness, roared with a trembling, fearful voice, then pushed her cubs into the thick grass, ordering them to hide. But Rasta, despite his fear, was filled with restless curiosity, with the roar sounding ever closer until the air grew heavy with danger. Then 3 massive males appeared, their thick black manes and glowing eyes advancing steadily, scanning the land with fiery malice. From the tall grass, Rasta watched his father stand bravely against the intruders, only for a swift and savage battle to break out. But the attackers had the upper hand, and soon the father fell beneath the ferocity of the invading coalition, his mighty voice silenced forever, leaving behind a void filled only with silence. The lionesses fled with the cubs, leaving behind their land and everything they had ever known. That was the moment of awakening for Rasta, a moment deeply marked by loss in his soul. As days and weeks passed, the pride struggled to survive. The land that was once their home had become full of dangers. Rasta, despite his youth and inexperience, watched his mother lead them with unbroken resolve, but he could see the exhaustion in her eyes and the scars left on her body by endless battles. One night, while they were resting in a dense patch of grass, a lone lion appeared on the horizon. His scars told stories of countless battles fought. This lion was Makulu, an old warrior who knew every corner of the savannah. He approached cautiously, roaring a low warning to the lionesses not to attack him. But instead of challenging them, he made an unexpected offer: to form a new coalition. Makulu gathered them to explain a coalition he was building with other young lions. He promised control of land and protection for their future. His words ignited a fire within Rasta, an opportunity to overcome his helplessness and become stronger than he ever imagined. But the thought of leaving his family to embark on such a dangerous, uncertain journey terrified him. The next morning, Makulu stood waiting for Rasta's decision. Though hesitant, Rasta chose to stay with his family, but bitterness filled his heart, as though he had missed a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Days passed, and the pride's condition worsened. Prey remained scarce, dangers increased, and they became easy targets not just for rival lions, but for the unrelenting hunger of the savannah. Then came the day Makulu returned, but this time he was not alone. With him were 2 young males, their manes growing thick, their eyes burning with ambition. Makulu stopped just short of the pride, looking directly at Rasta as though expecting him to join. Rasta hesitated, his eyes shifting between Makulu, his mother, and his siblings. Then, with his heart full of fear and hope, Rasta took a step forward toward the new coalition. He left everything behind. At first, Rasta struggled. His instincts were sharp, but his lack of experience showed in his hesitation during hunts and fights. The older lions in the coalition, like the wise leader Makulu and the fierce Kinky Tail, watched him carefully. They taught him that strength alone was not enough to survive. It also required courage and intelligence. Their first true test came one scorching afternoon when they clashed with a massive herd of buffalo, giants whose horns gleamed under Africa's burning sun. Makulu crouched low, signaling the others to follow, whispering a warning filled with caution. Buffaloes are dangerous, and united they are formidable. But together, so are we. Rasta's heartbeat raced as they crept toward the herd. The smell of buffalo filled the air. The ground shook under heavy hooves. When Makulu gave the signal, the group launched a sudden attack. Chaos erupted, the herd scattered, and buffalo cries echoed across the plains. Rasta focused on one isolated buffalo. This would be his first kill. The fight was brutal, a storm of dust and adrenaline. The buffalo resisted fiercely, but the coalition's coordination prevailed, and finally, the buffalo collapsed under their claws. As they began devouring their prey, Rasta tasted true victory for the first time. Pride filled his chest. He had proven his worth to the coalition. But this was only the beginning of Rasta's journey. No longer a timid cub hiding in the grass, he was now part of a bloody, unrelenting world where every success demanded new courage and unyielding determination. Rasta's days with the coalition turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Each hunt, each fight, each moment was a test of his growing strength and tireless will. The savannah was unforgiving. There was no place for the weak. Makulu constantly pushed them to become faster, stronger, and smarter. During this time, Rasta began building strong bonds with his coalition brothers. One of his closest allies was Kinky Tail, the lion known for his ferocity and unyielding determination. Kinky Tail constantly tested Rasta, forcing him into harsh training battles, throwing him to the ground with powerful blows. Despite the brutality, Rasta grew to respect Kinky Tail's strength and the loyalty hidden beneath his harshness. But not all relationships were as easy. There was Mr. T, later nicknamed the Devil, a lion who struck fear with a single glance, known for his aggression and volatile temper. His ambition was clear in every challenge. In every roar he let out to remind everyone of his dominance. He never missed a chance to prove himself superior, and Rasta often found himself clashing with his furious temper. Yet even Mr. T, with all his flaws, was a vital part of the coalition. His ferocity was a weapon they needed in the battles ahead. Over time, the reputation of the Mapogo coalition spread. They became known for their brutal efficiency not only in hunting prey, but also in facing down any lion who dared challenge them. In one confrontation, they had to fight two intruding males. The battle was fierce, roars echoing, claws tearing flesh. But Rasta, who had grown stronger, stood firm. That battle became a turning point for him. He was no longer just a follower. He was now a force to be reckoned with. With every victory, the coalition seized more land, driving rivals back and expanding their influence. But power brought new challenges. Maintaining control required constant vigilance and awareness of new threats. Rasta, now a powerful lion with a thick, distinctive mane, began to feel the heavy weight of the life he had chosen. In one great battle, Rasta faced an immense challenge as his brothers Kinky and Mr. T fought furiously at his side. The fight dragged them to the edge of despair. Rasta could not allow them to lose, not after all they had sacrificed, not after all they had fought for. Summoning the last of his strength, he lunged at the enemy leader, knocking him off Makulu's back and drawing the full fury of the enemy onto himself. The massive lion turned to face Rasta, and the ground shook with the clash of their roars. They fought in a savage final duel, Rasta refusing to surrender. He battled not just for himself, but for his coalition and the future they had bled to claim. Finally, with a deep roar that shook the savannah, Rasta landed a decisive blow. His opponent stumbled, weakened, and withdrew into the shadows. The coalition had won, but the victory was bitter. The battlefield was marked by deep wounds, heavy breaths, and the stench of blood. As the moon rose over the savannah, the coalition stood together, exhausted but victorious. Rasta, his body weary and his mane covered in dust, looked at his brothers and felt an unbreakable bond. They had faced death and emerged stronger. Their unity had been tested and proven. Yet, as he gazed upon the land they had claimed, Rasta could not ignore the cost. The savannah had taken its price, as it always did, and Rasta knew their greatest challenges still lay ahead. When the first rays of dawn broke over the savannah, the coalition stood atop a rocky outcrop, gazing out over their newly conquered land. The vast plains stretched endlessly before them, rich with prey and vital resources. It was a prize few coalitions could dream of, let alone seize by force. For a moment, the world seemed to stop, and in the silence, the weight of their triumph settled on them. Rasta, still weary from battle, felt pride surge through him as he looked over the plains. This land was not just a reward. It was a testament to their strength, unity, and determination. Every scar on his body, every loss they had endured, had led them to this moment. Their coalition had risen above the chaos of the savannah, carving their legacy into its soil. Together, they had defied the odds and claimed a future for themselves. But as Rasta basked in the glow of victory, he could not ignore a deeper truth. The savannah was never truly conquered. It was merely a gift that demanded constant vigilance. Their true prize was not the land itself, but the lessons learned through their unity and cunning. Now, they celebrated their victory as brothers. The days that followed their victory passed in cautious peace as the coalition patrolled their new territory, marked its borders, and made their presence known. Prey was plentiful, water was available, and the plains stretched farther than Rasta had ever imagined as a cub. He thought back to the journey that had brought them here, remembering the hesitation he once felt before taking the bold step that had made him the lion he was now. Rasta and his brothers crossed lands once held by other coalitions. Some had retreated to far-off regions, while others watched warily from the edges of Mapogo territory. Guilt stirred in Rasta's heart for the lives disrupted by their rise to power, but he knew the laws of the savannah were merciless. Survival required hard choices, and they had done what was necessary. One evening, as the coalition rested near a waterhole, a roar echoed across the plains. A new challenge was approaching. A coalition of younger, inexperienced males sought to stake their claim. The threat was clear, but this time, Rasta felt no fear. He was ready to face death, ready to endure losses. The rival coalition approached, leaderless and uncertain. Rasta led his brothers to confront them, his eyes filled with determination. The younger males roared, but their voices wavered. Then Rasta stepped forward, his presence overwhelming, his roar shaking the very air. The rivals hesitated, then retreated into the darkness, unwilling to test their strength against a coalition so steadfast and powerful. When the savannah grew quiet again, Rasta felt the thrill of victory and power. His scars were no longer just marks of pain, but symbols of defiance and survival. The savannah had tested him again, and every time he had risen. He was not just a lion within his coalition, he was its heart, a living testament to determination and the will to overcome. The savannah stretched before him, vast and eternal, both beautiful and cruel. Standing atop the rocky outcrop, his mane rustling in the wind over the land they now controlled, Rasta knew the coalition had achieved what many thought impossible. But he also knew their journey was not just about dominance. It was about discovering strength, courage, and resilience. Rasta looked at his brothers, each bearing the marks of his own battles. He saw the unity forged through fire and sacrifice. Together, they had become more than just a coalition. They were a force that embodied the essence of survival. The lessons they had learned, the strength in unity, the resilience in hardship, the courage to face the unknown, had become part of their very being. These lessons were not only for their survival, but for future generations who would follow. In their shadow, cubs watched, learned, and imitated Rasta's movements. They followed his decisions and drew inspiration from his unbreakable resolve. Through his courage and through the coalition's influence, Rasta now understood that their legacy was not merely the land they had claimed or the battles they had won. It was the knowledge they carried, the inspiration they passed on to other coalitions. They knew their time of struggle and their creation of a legendary coalition would be brief, but their story must live on in the savannah, carried by the winds, remembered by lions yet to come. As the sun set, painting the sky with fire and gold, Rasta felt content. The journey ahead would be long and arduous, filled with both loss and triumph, but it would lead him to a place where he could stand tall, knowing he had given everything to protect his coalition and their future. His life was not just survival, it was a legacy of strength, unity, and courage that would endure long after he was gone. Roaming gangs packed with extremely aggressive males. Together, they kill any roaming male that happens to be nearby. Extremely fierce, they launch violent assaults that do not stop until hours of bloody torment have passed. Even cubs and females might fall victim to this terrifying savagery, unleashed by one of the most notorious lion coalitions in African history. It is the bloody Mapogo coalition, with its warrior who preferred to stay away from the spotlight and fame, even though he was the key to war, the destroyer of beasts, the tank lion Dreadlocks. This lion was so fearsome that the Rangers were forced to kill him to give other prides a chance to survive in an attempt to allow them their share of land and territory. Their chances against this massive lion were utterly non-existent, not only because of his gigantic body, but also because of his unprecedented courage. Nothing could stand in front of Dreadlocks without being destroyed, and he would only hunt the largest of animals. While his brothers targeted rhinos, buffaloes, and smaller prey, he alone would charge into battle with massive, enraged hippos, or climb onto the tallest giraffes to seize their necks, bringing them down bloodied, suffering a slow death in the claws of this terrifying tank beast. From the time he was a cub with his 4 brothers, born into the Sparta Pride between 2001 and 2002, they were destined to become a terrifying future for the plains and forests of the Masai Mara. These cubs were a threat to everyone, even to their own kind, for it is estimated that about 100 lions were killed by this fearsome coalition. Their power grew when they were joined by a lone older male from outside Sparta, called Makulu, who came from Kruger National Park. Like the other cubs, he had once faced death early in his roaming life and survived by a miracle. Their lives continued as they learned surprise hunting methods and survival tactics by observing other older lions, especially after the addition of their older brother Makulu, the experienced hunter, who was 2 years their senior. Photographers and filmmakers noticed how unusually united these young lions were. Never before had anyone seen a coalition of 6 powerful lions with no disputes over leadership. The leader of the coalition was simply the eldest brother. After building his massive body, Dreadlocks was content to remain the unknown soldier, the key to war, the crushing lion that ended disputes among his brothers when conflicts began to arise as they grew stronger and more violent, each eager to prove themselves. This was especially true as they dominated different prides of females, each brother trying to demonstrate his ferocity to secure mating rights. Dreadlocks and his brothers had gruesome killing methods. They attacked without mercy, and they managed to control more than 700,000 square kilometers, over half the size of South Africa, for nearly 6 years. At the peak of his youth and strength, Dreadlocks terrified everyone. Alongside his brothers, their coalition was feared by all. No lion dared to meet them, every beast avoided them, and none dared trespass on their territory or even approach their borders. But decline was inevitable, especially as disputes over leadership and power began. Division was the breaking point that would bring an end to the golden years of this terrifying coalition. And indeed, the coalition split into 2 groups. Dreadlocks chose to stay with Makulu, the older and wiser brother, as well as Pretty Boy and Rasta. Meanwhile, Mr. T, nicknamed the Devil for his grotesque savagery, went with his inseparable brother Kinky Tail. This split was the downfall of the Mapogo Empire, a coalition that would forever remain a bloody and terrifying chapter in the history of legendary lions. Yet no lion, despite the division, could dare invade Mapogo territories, especially those ruled by Makulu, supported by the tank Dreadlocks, who alone could repel any intruder unlucky enough to cross into their domain. He would chase them far beyond the borders or rip them apart if they dared to stand against him. The Rangers, who had spent years gathering stories and making documentaries about these lions, especially the terrifying Dreadlocks, had no choice but to end his life, to give new lions a chance to form coalitions that might rise in power and claim some of the fame long dominated by the ferocious Mapogo brothers. The story of the Mapogo truly ended with the death of Dreadlocks. Weakness and division spread among them, and other prides began to take their chances at attacking, seeking revenge and retribution for the many lions that had fallen to the coalition over the years. The story of Dreadlocks will remain etched in the minds of all wildlife lovers for decades to come. Tales will continue to be told about this massive, ferocious lion who created a terrifying history alongside the strongest lions in Africa at that time. Infamous, legendary, brutal, barbaric. Words that almost take your breath away and strike fear when heard for the first time. Descriptions of a group of lions that carved their name in blood over many long years, when they chose to rule and dominate the vast lands of the Sabi Sands Reserve, spreading terror through its plains and mountains. These lions were called the Mapogo. Their story was not just another coalition of lions that lived, expanded, and mated within their ruled lands like others, but rather the continuation of a legendary horror. Had fate allowed it to last longer, it would have wiped out every rival predator trying to survive from hunger or death. With a death toll exceeding 100 lions, this coalition demonstrated its brutality and violence, shocking followers and filmmakers alike who documented many films showing the horrifying cruelty of the Mapogo. They displayed levels of savagery and violence never before seen among lions. Their ferocity even drove them to attack humans, their livestock, and anything else that caught their eye, satisfying their appetite for flesh and their endless thirst for blood. It is claimed this coalition was named after a South African security company known for its extremely harsh and frightening methods of dealing with criminals. Like most cubs born into a large pride, destined to eventually be expelled, 5 young males were driven out to find their own path and to eliminate potential rivals who might one day dare to overthrow their fathers and take control. This coalition was thus formed from those 5 expelled cubs who met a slightly older lion named Makulu on their way out. He was suspected to have come from the same Sparta pride they were born into, making him their elder brother and leader in their journey into the unknown. Makulu, born in 1998, was named in the local Zulu language for big or impressive. The pride itself was named after the Sparta farm, part of their territory, also known as Londolozi, bordering Mala Mala. The second brother was Pretty Boy, named for his strategic battle tactics that allowed him to stay unscarred and maintain his striking looks during fights. The third was Mr. T, known as the Devil, with his enormous mane and terrifying destructive power. The name came not by chance, but because of the years he spent killing, displacing, and destroying, even cubs born of his own brothers. He knew no mercy, and trouble followed wherever he went. The fourth, Scar, was marked by a distinctive scar on his face, along with others on his hip and spine, testament to his constant involvement in battles that never ceased. Rasta was the fifth, known for his immense strength and fierce defense of the coalition. Then there was Kinky Tail, named for his bent tail scar, who was the ever-loyal shadow and protector of his brother Mr. T. The 5 cubs were born between 2001 and 2002. Rasta, Scar, and Pretty Boy were the older ones, with Mr. T and Kinky Tail born later. The latter 2 would remain inseparable until the end. After enduring severe hardship and hunger in the early days of exile, The cubs and their elder brother survived through failed hunts and stealing from other predators. Slowly, they grew strong enough to hunt on their own, mastering ambushes, chases, and takedowns. As their hunting skills improved, they began taking down increasingly larger prey. They killed hippos, rhinos, giraffes, and more, but their specialty was hunting buffalo. Thanks to their massive size and raw strength, Mapogo lions became feared masters of buffalo hunts. By 2004, the coalition moved west and made its first attempt at seizing territory in the Sabi Sands area. Such large coalitions were unusual, and none of this scale had been seen in Kruger National Park, and especially Sabi Sands, in decades. Abundant prey made the region ideal for apex predators, setting the stage for their rise. After securing lands in the south, in 2006, they heard the roars of challengers. 4 young lions of the Tsalala coalition, who boldly marked the territory as theirs. The Mapogo wasted no time. They isolated one Tsalala male and killed him, forcing the others to flee as far as they could to save their lives. This marked the beginning of the reign of terror of the Mapogo. They spread, expanded, and dominated nearby areas, mating with lionesses from different prides and killing any males they encountered or were unlucky enough to cross into their realm. In February 2007, they brutally killed a lion known as Rocky, or the Serengeti male, and began feeding on him. By June 2007, tensions rose between Mr. T and Makulu over dominance. During this split, the 5 brothers killed Makulu's cubs, born of different genes. Mr. T and Kinky Tail then broke away, establishing their own territory. In December of the same year, Makulu and the remaining coalition clashed with 2 Kahuma males. Later, one was found badly wounded and unable to move, less than 200 meters from the Mapogo, who had seized lionesses of the Styx pride once ruled by Kahuma males. By the next day, his body was found, beaten to death. Over time, all coalitions weaken as they age, leaving them vulnerable to younger, vengeful lions seeking to prove dominance or avenge slain kin. This decline was inevitable for the Mapogo, especially after the split of Mr. T and Kinky Tail, who established dominance in Londolozi with brutal patrols. By 2010, the Majingalanes coalition of 5 strong young males entered Mr. T and Kinky Tail's territory. By then, only Pretty Boy, aged 12, and Makulu, aged 15, remained. They withdrew eastward, far from the rising power of the Majingalanes. By October 2012, the last 2 were spotted in Kruger National Park at Paul Kruger Gate, feeding on a buffalo. Makulu, the last survivor, was seen alone in January 2013 at Malamala at the age of 16. He never appeared again. The Mapogo coalition had killed hundreds of predators and prey, including cubs and defending lionesses. This savagery was one of the reasons their reign eventually ended, allowing other coalitions to survive and expand. It is believed the Mapogo sired cubs in the Sand River Pride, the Ottawa Pride, and the Tsalala Pride, and likely many others. Their reputation for cannibalism was one of their most violent traits, in contrast to other lions who were known to coexist peacefully with humans and visitors. The Mapogo inspired mixed feelings among those who followed their story. They were seen as merciless and savage, yet their dominance brought stability and safety for their cubs and order to the region during their reign. For years, their impact on the Sabi Sands ecosystem was immense, having culled such a large number of lions. Elephant Plains reported that nearly 40% of the lion population was killed by the Mapogo alone. Willem Botha, head of anti-poaching at the time, confirmed they killed between 90 and 110 lions. He himself was forced to put down 15 lions left paralyzed by the Mapogo's brutality. Ultimately, the Mapogo coalition was immortalized in the famous wildlife documentary Brothers in Blood, Lions of Sabi Sands, a notorious band of brothers who waged a savage campaign to dominate and rule Sabi Sands within Kruger National Park. In a place full of apex predators, few reach such legendary status. But the Mapogo story left its mark, an eternal icon in history of lions born to rule and conquer, embodying the raw power of Africa's most feared coalition. Everything began with an eerie silence, as if nature itself was hiding a terrifying secret. In the heart of the Serengeti, that vast land where life and death breathed together, the calm turned into a nightmare no one could have imagined. The lions, the majestic kings of the savannah, began falling one after another. Mighty males, unmatched hunting females, and cubs bursting with vitality, all fell victim to a mysterious, hidden, and devastating weakness. It all happened in 1994, the tragic year when a brutal epidemic swept mercilessly through the lions, leaving scientists stunned and confused as they asked, what was killing the champions of the savannah? Stay with us to uncover this terrifying hidden secret and the story of the lion who defied death, the hidden death mystery. The answer was not simple. It was far more terrifying than anyone imagined. It was not a single enemy, but as if nature itself had turned against its lions. Two separate diseases, which had never caused devastation when they appeared alone, joined forces under harsh climatic conditions to create a perfect biological storm. They combined canine distemper virus, usually linked to domestic dogs, and babesia, a parasite carried by ticks resembling malaria in its destruction of blood cells. Together, they formed a lethal weapon. But what made these two old enemies turn into such deadly killers? The answer lay in the harsh climate of that time. Serengeti, the stage of wild nature. In 1994, the Serengeti was, as it had always been, vast and wild, astonishing in its beauty. It was the grand stage of safari journeys, where only the wealthy enjoyed watching this untamed world. Passionate scientists observed the big cats, recording every moment of their lives, their hunts, their coalitions, their bloody battles, and their hierarchies. The lions were the undisputed stars, reigning over the savannah with their majestic presence. But that year, the term global warming began to echo in scientific circles, though still seen as a distant threat. For field experts, however, the signs were clear. Rainy seasons were shifting, droughts would last longer, and the ecosystem was losing the rhythm that had kept it balanced for thousands of years. Drought and flood, the beginning of disaster. Then suddenly, without warning, the lions began to wither. At first, the symptoms were subtle: clouded eyes, staggering steps, and a fading appetite. But within days, the condition escalated to seizures, internal bleeding, and inevitable death. Entire prides vanished as if a deadly phantom swept across the savannah. Panic struck scientists. What could kill lions this quickly? It required intensive international efforts to unravel the terrifying mystery. The truth revealed a true environmental nightmare. The severe drought that struck the Serengeti before the outbreak had already weakened the lions. Many animals had died in the heat, and their carcasses became easy meals for the starving lions. But these carcasses carried babesia, which multiplied at a staggering rate. Then came the rains, but they were no mercy, only a curse. Floods swept the region, creating a perfect environment for ticks carrying babesia and canine distemper virus. The lions, already weakened by hunger, now faced a double assault from two unseen enemies. Massacre of the kings of the savannah. Other predators, like hyenas and leopards, were not devastated, but the lions, despite their strength, were the most vulnerable. The joint infection wiped out nearly a third of the Serengeti's lions. The savannah grew quieter, as if bidding farewell to its kings. For the first time, scientists witnessed firsthand how climate change could unleash a devastating epidemic storm. The lion who defied the impossible amid this devastation. An unbelievable story emerged. The story of a single lion condemned to death, yet refusing to surrender. He was named Asclepius after the Greek god of healing, for he was a living miracle. This lion, seemingly wrapped in death's claws, defied all expectations. But what made him different? How did he transform from a crawling skeleton into a king who returned to his throne in full strength? This story is not just about survival, but about lessons in perseverance and life. 3 groups, 3 fates. To understand the epidemic, scientists focused on 3 lion prides: R120, R121, and R122. The pride named R122 was the first to fall. This young group, which had not yet produced cubs, collapsed quickly. The dominant male was the first victim, followed by the females like dominoes. In less than a week, 122 rand was gone forever. In R120, something strange happened. The adult lions, strong and experienced, surrendered quickly. But the cubs showed lighter symptoms, yet they did not live long. Scientists debated and questioned further. Was the disease itself the cause, or the loss of maternal care? The answer was unclear. But in R121, something impossible began to emerge. Asclepius, between agony and resilience, R121 was made up of 2 males, 4 females, and 5 cubs, a strong and united pride. But the disease made no distinction. The adults fell first, then the cubs. But one male, Asclepius, clung to life. For over a month, scientists watched what they described as a slow torment. He crawled, emaciated to the bone, drank from tiny pools, and barely moved. He lay beneath a dead tree, motionless, until rodents mistook him for a corpse. Yet, in those moments of despair, he caught a mouse here, a lizard there. It was just enough to keep his heart beating. The turning point. Scientists prepared to record another death. But Asclepius refused the end. After 45 days of torment, the impossible happened. A jackal approached, thinking the lion dead, and bit him cautiously. In a primal surge, Asclepius rose and seized the jackal by the throat. That meal marked the beginning of his recovery. He did not stop with that prey. Asclepius devised a new, astonishing strategy. He would feign death, wait for vultures and small animals, then strike. With each catch, his body regained strength. He began to walk steadily, hunt carefully, and drink more. The disease seemed to retreat from his body, a scientific miracle. Asclepius became more than just a surviving lion. He was a scientific mystery. Did his blood hold the key to resisting both diseases? Could it save future generations of lions? Collecting a blood sample was risky. Sedating Asclepius might have killed him, and the scientists were not willing to take that chance. So they chose only to observe. Loneliness and the search for hope. Lions are social creatures, but Asclepius was alone. After his recovery, he did what lone males do. He set off in search of a new pride. Along the way, he found a sick, frail lioness showing the same signs of disease. She accepted him instantly, but she died days later. What shocked scientists was that Asclepius remained unharmed. Had he become immune? A king returns to his throne. Asclepius continued his journey across the savannah until he reached an area untouched by the epidemic. There, he found 3 young, healthy lionesses. He took control of the pride with ease, fathered strong cubs, and fiercely protected his pride. He had become king of the land. But as always, the savannah's struggles were merciless. In 1997, a younger, stronger lion appeared. A brutal battle followed, and despite his courage, Asclepius was defeated and killed in the end. An unanswered mystery. After his death, scientists brought his body and examined every part, his blood, tissues, and bones. But they found nothing. No genetic mutations, no unique antibodies. Years later, a new theory emerged. Asclepius had survived because of what he ate, and through his unique and clever hunting strategies, he had sustained his immune system long enough to overcome the disease. A lesson from a king. Asclepius was not just a lion. He was a symbol of life and resilience. No matter how harsh and painful the circumstances, sometimes the solution is simpler than we imagine. Perseverance, willpower, and adaptability can create the impossible. In the heart of the savannah, Asclepius taught us that hope is born from challenge, and that life, no matter how fragile or exhausting, does not surrender easily.